Today I'm talking about climate death, a topic that took shape from within my own art production, from past series such as Panorama of the Anthropocene and Zombie Capitalism. From these works, I deepened my awareness of climate change and its ongoing effects, which ultimately stem from the flawed economic relations between rich and poor. As the political economist John Bellamy Foster argues, global warming is just one of the many signs of planetary exhaustion, including ocean acidification, the depletion of the ozone layer, the loss of biodiversity, radioactive pollution, and so on. All these phenomena feel bundled together when we speak of climate change, because, as we'll see in a moment, they all carry with them a deeply emotional charge. This inner charge is what I call climate death, a looming aura, seemingly haunting everyone's psyche, the understated presence of an unavoidable demise, the inescapable death of our planetary ecosystem as we know it, and also the death of our economy as we know it. Like it or not, these systems have been overloaded with the great acceleration of capital in the Western Hemisphere since the end of the Second World War, and now globally in all hemispheres since the end of the Cold War. This worldwide capitalist system is based on infinite market growth via the unlimited extraction of natural resources, be it mineral, floral, or faunal nature, and the unlimited exploitation of human resources from the labor productivity of subordinate classes, races, and genders. Our collective response to this coming death by climate resonates uncannily with what Elizabeth Kubler-Ross calls the 5 stages of grief. Swiss-American psychiatrist links this sequence of emotions with the reaction of encountering one's mortality. I claim this is also our collective response when encountering climate change, the death of our ecosystem, and soon to follow, the end of our civilization. Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief are denial, bargaining, anger, depression, and finally consent. Most obviously linked to the revelations of climate change, the first and strongest reaction from capitalist societies facing nature's collapse and mass extinction is denial, climate change denial. But the truth of climate change is well documented, its damage proven, even by ExxonMobil's own private research, confirming since 1977 the true consequences of exponential fossil fuel consumption. Yet, instead of sharing these facts or changing their ways, the petrol lobby committed itself to hide this data, deny the evidence, and contradict what is plain to see, to deflect and delay any policy change against their profit margins. So once denial is no longer possible, with the continuous breaking of heat records, with the proliferation of tornadoes, hurricanes, and floodings on one side of the globe, and on the other, forest fires, droughts, melting glaciers, smog, sandstorms, and so on. Once all this is undeniable, Then comes the second phase of climate death, which is bargaining. For the past 20 years or so, the global consensus of nations and corporations have bitterly admitted that yes, climate change is real, but no, it is not our fault. Among these, British Petroleum, aka BP, effectively bargained their way out of the guilty quagmire when, in 2004, they coined the term carbon footprint. This distracted the public's attention away from BP's own toxic actions to instead point the finger at consumers, accusing them of individually hurting the environment. And now, the evidence is clear that corporations are liable for well above 80% of the planet's pollution. Geographer Matthew T. Huber and others reveal that industrial production and intensive farming are causing severe ecological harm even before their products are ready to consume. Global brands thus maximize their profit margins by outsourcing assembly lines to faraway lands, overextending supply chains and swelling the exhaust clouds of cargo ships and lorries. These ever longer assembly and supply chains, deploying single-use goods wrapped in disposable boxes, commodities that break down and come out of style via planned obsolescence and fast fashion trends, these have nothing to do with consumer freedom of choice. Indeed, the talking points heard at World Economic Forums, COP conferences, and other climate summits are simply dedicated to gaslighting people. Their vast expanses of wind and solar farms are not replacing fossil fuels, but adding to them. Supply ever-growing demands in energy to power more cars and delivery vehicles, more heaters and air conditioners, more washers and dryers, and more Wi-Fi devices piling up in our suburban homes. Likewise, recycling is becoming another irrational tool for climate bargaining, a senseless ritual enacted by moving trash around in a vicious circle. Countless studies on synthetic pollution have shown that just a minute portion of plastic waste is ever properly recycled. The rest is floating in oceans, flying out of incinerators, and flowing as microparticles within our blood. As we soon understand that climate bargaining isn't working any more than denial, a third grief emerges, an angry reaction rising from the status quo of empty negotiations. On the streets of our cities, anger ferments against the escalations of war, for the monopoly of resources abroad, and against police brutality, for the monopoly of violence at home. Increasingly, protests are staged in art museums, the prime location of what Pierre Bourdieu calls cultural capital. Recent attacks by Just Stop Oil on masterpieces by Van Gogh and Picasso converge with the strikes of Extinction Rebellion on political capital, Black Lives Matter on civil rights capital, Idle No More on ancestral land capital, and Greta Thunberg on academic capital when boycotting school to confront climate change. All these actions are transforming people's grief for a dying world into grievances against corporations, killing the world when perpetuating business models that place profits before the well-being of peoples and nature. Unfortunately, anger is also directed at the growing masses of climate refugees, when compassion should help to see ourselves in them, walking in their shoes, fleeing from their homes, their crops burned by wildfires, their way of life now scorched in war zones. Instead of seeing all this with compassion, nationalism is blinding us, dividing us between the so-called collective West, NATO against the emerging BRICS nations, drawing new geopolitical front lines that beget only injury, hunger, and pollution. But anger too will recede. The imminent death of hospitable climate will soon trigger another stage of grief in depression. Climate depression will touch not only business investors, broken by their lost fortunes. Depression will hit hardest on the youngest members of our societies when facing a longer lifetime in the dystopian world ahead, with little hope for a nurturing future. Depression will express itself as anxiety, introversion, and insomnia, as well as a loss of hope or will to fight against climate death. This premature admission of defeat, tinged in suicidal tendencies and smothered in the biblical eschatology of end times, this depression could open the floodgates to the worst effects of climate change, because as we passively despair, the profit industries will encounter no resistance in the pursuit of their extractions until the last dollar burns at the rock bottom of their minds. But now, as well as stirring self-doubt and passivity, this introspective phase of climate depression may well revitalize our defiance. Like Camus' Sisyphus, contemplating our cursed fate becomes an essential means to accept the absurdity of our struggle, to fully commit to its cause, even while knowing that its cause is already lost. Climate will change whatever we do. Even so, it's never too late to challenge the greed of capitalism. Planet Earth is already warmer by more than 1 degree. Hurricanes and wildfires have already gone amok. But if corporations continue to burn fossil fuels until the last drop in the ground, global temperatures may rise by another 2, 4, or 8 degrees. And under those conditions, no human civilization will survive, especially not capitalist relations. Therefore, our only choices are end capitalism now, or nature will stop it later, much more violently. After denial, bargaining, anger, and depression, let us come to terms with the final stage of climate death when reaching consent. We all need to accept, sooner rather than later, accept the end of the Holocene as we know it, and the end of 10,000 years of predictable seasons, which allowed for agriculture and industry to flourish. These practices were impossible in the ice ages of yesterday, and they will be unlikely in the hot ages of tomorrow. The more we delay this final stage of consent, and the more we dismiss the finitude of this planet, the farther out we go, out of what Bellamy Foster calls planetary boundaries, closer to climate conditions hostile to all life on Earth. our only hope lies in the realization that capitalism must go. In the current climate crisis, wasting time climbing the wealth ladder to exhibit superior class, greater culture and taste, this is already recognized as sociopathic, a failure to connect with others, and above all, a missed opportunity to address the emergencies of famine, war, and disease. From now on, our common goal must be a system change to address climate change, to end the divisions of class, race, and gender, then close the gap between human and non-human, and finally, to re-acknowledge nature, not as a wilderness to conquer, but as a totality in the web of life and matter, a macrocosm that will forever contain us, that will forever contain us.